a really incredible organization that you have built. It spans so many activities. It's really impressive. So I'm very much honored to speak here in front of this audience, but also honored to be joining this general group. It seems like what you're building is very, very unique. So I hope everybody feels and appreciates that. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'll walk through a number of things. And really, the point of my talk now is just to help you, to provoke you, give you a little bit of a perspective of what I'm seeing. I think it's really fascinating that the people on this call and the people as part of this organizations are all folks, Kazakhs or Central Asians who moved to somewhere else. That already gives me a sense that you are adventuring and courageous people. So this is exactly the kind of audience and group that energizes me. So let me go ahead and start my presentation. Galym, let me know if you can see this.
Yeah, Galym, we can
Okay,
see and we can hear you.
good, good. Okay, so if you don't mind, I will probably start a little bit with my background because, again, as I hear people that are this audience, you all have very unique stories. I think we all have unique stories of how we ended up pursuing education or our careers and lives abroad, and but there's something that unites us all in terms of our roots. So, I will spend a few minutes on that because it seems that that is important. Um, so first of all, where it all started, I was born in Almaty, Kazakhstan. I lived there till I was about 8 years old. And some of the earliest experiences I had there very much shaped in terms of what I wanted to do in my life. I followed my father on a lot of his medical trips across Kazakhstan. My father was involved in health reform. And one of the things he instilled in me was he wanted to make sure that the medicines, this is in the mid 90s when things was pretty difficult in Kazakhstan, that medicine and tuberculosis medicine would not just reach the cities, but it would go to the far distant auls and the rural parts of Kazakhstan. And I would visit him and travel with him on some of these trips. And it really had a lasting impact on me, both the power of medicine, but also how to do so in an organized way and how to do so with equality for both rural and urban populations. Then circumstances were such that my family and we had to come to the United States. We came here in the late 1990s. In 1998, we arrived in Oregon. I like to tell, I think I'm pretty sure that we were the only Kazakh family in Oregon at that time. It was pretty lonely. And my parents, they certainly struggled in the beginning. But I think what they did was very important for us. We had to leave Kazakhstan very quickly, and we just had the backpacks. And I remember in our backpacks, we had two sets of books. We had a set of books of Russian math books, and we had the Russian translation of the Quran. And so when we came to United States, in some ways, I view that as the metaphor of what shaped us was education and value system. So that here in the States or wherever you may be, you kind of maintain that roots of education and value system. And then if any of you come visit to Oregon, let me know. If you come to our house, you'll see all of the decorations around the house are Kazakh. We have various sorts of, paintings and even Kazakh weaponry, bows and arrows. So we really tried to maintain that identity even when we came, and I think that's very important. Anyway, so obviously, like a classic immigrant mother, my mom, hammered us hard on education, and we did as well as we could. And I went to Stanford for undergrad. And I still had that desire to be a physician, so my mindset was always pre-med. But at the same time, the work that my father did in both healthcare reform and others made me think that maybe I should study economics or something structural that would help me understand how the world works outside of just medicine. So I majored in economics while doing my pre-med requirements at Stanford, but most of my extracurricular time was all in research. So I did initially research in medical imaging, primarily in ultrasound and 2D spectral tracking. I then afterwards went into more basic science research and did stem cell biology, viral vector engineering in particular, and um, and I really enjoyed that. And then, I was planning to go straight to medical school after undergrad because in the US you do them separately. I know in other countries you can combine. Yeah, but I was encouraged by my mentors to take at least 1 year gap year in between undergrad and medical school to try something new. And so I figured if I'm going to be a doctor for the rest of my life, maybe I'll try for 1 year to do something different. And I had a very serendipitous opportunity to join a physician investor, a doctor investor, to be his apprentice, to be his intern. And I joined that, and I will tell you, I fell in love with it. Right when 6 months before I graduated, I was, learning from these professors, and the moment I came on to the venture capital side, these same professors were now coming to me, and I was on the other side of the table reviewing their work. And so it was both empowering, but also it made me realize just how far away from patient impact all this research was. And it was just a very energizing kind of work, and so I decided to lean into that. And one last message I'll say before I move on from this slide is whether it was for undergrad or medical school or throughout my career, my roots as someone from Kazakhstan was always throughout. My application essay to both undergrad and medical school were all about this inspiration that happened when I was following my father in Kazakhstan. So I think one of the things I found powerful that your roots and experiences are actually your superpowers. We shouldn't shy away from them. And the good thing, most of us Kazakhs are very proud. So I know we don't shy away from that. I think I mentioned actually some of this. So I did my undergrad at Stanford, then I worked at this fund. I worked there ultimately for 3 years. We invested across diagnostics, health IT, and a number of interesting opportunities in non-invasive cardiac imaging. Then I did my MD, MBA, but here's an important point. While I was doing grad school, and if there are any active graduate students today, right now on this call, I would say you have to use your graduate years in a very unique way if you want to create the kind of impact on a technology. And let's say if you ever want to start a company, so on and so forth. So I was doing my academics, of course, but most of my extracurricular time, I was side hustling. I was either interning for a venture fund or I was creating consulting projects with Japanese pharma companies. And by the way, it all sounds really fancy, but it doesn't actually look fancy. Like it required me a lot of emails, creating opportunities when it looked very murky. It wasn't sure. I created research roles that then I had, a pharma company sponsor. So it's a lot more messier than it all sounds so nice and clean here. But that's a very important part of the learning because then you realize like, okay, what's working, what's not, where are your strengths relative to the opportunity set. So using your graduate school time to build up your resume for what you want to do after is very important. Obviously, if you want to go straight to academia and you want to be a professor, that's a little bit different. But even then, I will still push you and provoke you. I obviously grew up in the Stanford ecosystem, and every professor here has some kind of non-academic endeavor, and it's not viewed in a very it's not viewed as like, oh man, these guys just want to make money. It's actually viewed in a very high esteem to say this person doesn't want to just create research. This person wants to make sure their research actually impacts the world. And yes, if it's electrical engineering, it's probably software, but or something like that. But if it's in medicine or material science, then they are in those fields. So that's one of the mentalities that I think is now changing. But for a long time, even when I was in graduate school at Stanford, there were some professors who said, Galym, stop doing all this. You need to just focus on your research, which was fine. I did that. But anyway, are just some of the learnings. And now, for the last 6 years, I've been at Lightspeed Venture Partners. We're a large global venture capital firm, one of the top three largest in the world. I personally have deployed a little over $500 million into across broad range of healthcare companies, and both early stage and growth. So hopefully that gives me some perspective that will be valuable for folks. Now quickly, I have about 11 slides, so I'll try to get through them relatively quickly, and so people have time. But I wanted to help maybe educate, what is venture capital? There are many different ways that you can fund a company. A lot of people fund through private equity. A lot of people fund through lending. If you look at, back in Kazakhstan or developing world, most of funding there is just project finance. It's more like banking. Private equity is a little bit more risky, and things like that happen. Venture capital is a way of investing that follows primarily this concept of the power law. And the power law is that 80% of all of your returns will come probably from 20% of your investments. It's another way to view it is to say the most you can ever lose on an investment is one times your money. One times your money that you invest is the most you can lose. It just goes to zero. But your gains in venture capital can be not just 2x, 3x, they can be 10x, 100x, sometimes 1,000x. But therefore, the mentality of venture capital is that any particular project has to have venture capital returns. And when people say venture capital returns, is that they mean this capital is not just to finance some small advance. It's supposed to disrupt an entire field, disrupt an entire market. It's supposed to go into things that can essentially lead to those 10 to 100x returns, so that then all of those companies that went to zero can be made up. It's a very high risk endeavor, but we are living in a world where venture capital has grown about 10 times since about 10 years ago. Like that's how large of an asset class this has become. And so what do I do day to day? First, I need to find companies. I need to find teams. It's usually technologies. I do sometimes do a lot of technical reading, but oftentimes I follow people rather than ideas. And that's an important concept. People, a strong person can overcome many different obstacles, but an idea can, once it hits one obstacle, could essentially stop right there. Then after I find the company, I actually have to convince my partners, and different venture capital funds work differently, but my venture capital fund works in a way that we have to convince an investment committee, even if you're senior level partner. So I have to convince my partners. And then after that, once I convince them, I have to win that deal against my competitors. And in Silicon Valley, there's this famous road called Sand Hill Road. My office is also on Sand Hill Road. That Sand Hill Road together probably controls, I would say, is at least headquartered more than $100 billion of capital. It's funny when if you guys ever come visit, you'll drive by and be like, it's so quiet. Is it really happening? But yes, it does happen inside those rooms. And so on this Sand Hill Road are all my competitors too. So a strong founder can go from one door to the next, to the next, to the next. And so I have to beat all those people. And for the best founders, it gets very competitive very quickly. Then once I win the deal, it's not, then I have to build. I have to help that founder in a way that is differentiated. Smart founders will say, well, Galym, your dollar is the same green color as this guy's dollar. Like, what difference does it make? So then you have to say, well, look, once I invest in you, here's what I can do. I can make you introductions to XYZ. I can help you recruit the best talent from Stanford or from this or from that. And so that's a crucial build period. And that's usually, 3 to 4 years, even more. And then ultimately, venture capital is a fund. We are a fund. We are investors. We have to get our return. And that return means that the company either has to stay independent and become an IPO, become a public company, or it needs to be acquired. And and there's different, obviously, journeys. I think in biotech, a lot of companies just get M&A because of, because there's a very vibrant market for that. But in technology, there are a lot of times there's no one really looking to buy you, and you have to go all the way to IPO. So anyway, I just wanted to give you that little bit of a journey in terms of what a venture capital does day to day. And by the way, all of this you have to multiply in my mind. So I am on the board of six companies, board observer for another. So say I'm looking at about eight companies in general. So all of that, my eight companies are somewhere along the journey of find. Well, I guess I've already found them, and I guess I already won. So eight are in build and exit mode in different stages. And every year I have to make new investments. So it's a rather busy career if one is interested. Now, I want to just let's get into kind of this is very US centric, so I apologize, but I hope it serves as an example of some of the opportunities and themes that I want to have for you guys to have in the back of your head. So let's look at healthcare as a market in the United States. It's $5 trillion spent every year. It's more than most GDPs of most countries. I think Kazakhstan GDP of the entire country, I think, is 300 billion or something like that. So gives you a sense of scale. But in the United States, of that 5 trillion, 1 trillion is spent on annual administrative burden. So this is paperwork, insurance, medical records, all of that. So most of my investment career over the last 6 years, most of my investing has actually been on that administrative AI. And why? Look, I know my background is more my background was in research, technical research, but I once I landed at Lightspeed, I had to be nimble. I couldn't just be like, all right, just because I did viral vector research, I'm going to only invest in viral vector companies. I couldn't do that because I needed to see where the market is, where's the appetite, and I saw that technology, AI, and these applications, I had to quickly learn them or learn them enough, and then to say, you know what? I think this $1 trillion of spend in paper pushing, just this is just paper documentation pushing, this will be impacted first than clinical AI, which has a lot more regulatory, a lot more technical hurdles, so on and so forth. So most of my investments have been there, and some of them have gone very well. But what's interesting, I wanted to just give you a sense of like, here's how the frame thinks. Here's what I'm good at. And here's where my background is, but you have to be nimble. So for me, that's where I spent most of the time. But now more and more, what I like to think that as a venture capitalist, you have to be well, or the way I view it is like research in universities is 10 years before the real world feels it. Then investors like venture capitalists invest 5 years before it hits the world. So we look at the university research, see what's happening, what's on the horizon, and then we invest there. And then we work really hard for it to hit the real world, and we actually guide it to hit the real. Like we are part of the reason why it hits the real world. So I share that because then once I now this administrative AI layer, there are now a lot of people. This is not common knowledge. Everyone's going after here but I've already made my investments. That's why they're doing well. You gotta be a step ahead. So now while everyone's focused on administrative AI, where I already have companies doing well, I'm now focusing on clinical AI, where people are like, no, 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 too difficult. It's complex, et cetera, et cetera. So on the bottom here, I just wanted to give you an example like no like in the United States physicians are a guild. I don't want to say mafia, but like it is a constricted guild where people say no more than this, and that's why they pay so well, so on and so forth. But for the first time you start seeing groups like ARPA-H. ARPA-H is essentially the healthcare arm of DARPA. DARPA is the government's like secretive group to do military research. So the government's thinking, look, our aging demographics, we're not going to be able to pay for this. If you look at our, just like Kazakhstan has pensions for the elderly, the American pension system for the elderly in healthcare will go bankrupt in the mid 2030s unless things change. And so because of that, like you're starting to see early drops of how do you actually take out the clinician out of the loop on certain capabilities. Of course, you'll never get the doctor out of the surgery room. You'll never get the doctor out of certain capabilities. But I look at these small details. These are, and then there are interesting AI sandboxes being built in small states. Like no one has ever heard that Utah, Colorado, they're starting these small little experiments of how you can have an AI prescribe and manage care instead of a physician doing it. Of course, there's a lot of rules, so on and so forth, but that's what I'm paying attention to now. And anyway, that's a little bit of just a framework of how to think. Now, let me see. I'll probably select. These are just a few examples and learnings, but I wanted you just to see how, like, what were the key learnings? So, a bridge is a company that does clinical documentation. Think about an AI that listens to a doctor and a patient speaking, and then it summarizes that information into a really nice clinical note. This company has done extremely well, and ultimately it was because the physician was there at the right place at the right time, matched with really strong execution. A Sort Health is a company that uses AI agents for voice AI. So think about when someone calls into a physician doctor, says, "Hey, I want to schedule an appointment." It right now, America employs, I think, a few million call center people, and those are all now being automated by AI agents. And this is a company that started 2 years ago, but two young guys when the technology was actually pretty bad. So the technology didn't work. The voice sounded robotic. It didn't complete the sentences. But the insight, the lesson on a sort, is that they started building knowing where things were heading. Skating to where the puck is heading. I don't know, in hockey, you skate. You don't skate following where the puck is right now. You skate to where the puck is going. You anticipate where it is, and that's where you're aiming. So in the point where you're aiming, you look like an idiot. You look like, why are you building? The technology is not ready. It's not very good. But you already know that in 2 years it will be good. You make that bet. And there are some investors who say, you know what? I'll go ahead and make that bet. Even though right now it doesn't work, in 2 years it will. And they did that while no one followed. And then once it started working, everybody followed, but they were way ahead already. That's another kind of example of how venture worked in this situation. Frontera Health is one of my favorite companies. I'm on the board of here too, and it attacks the autism market. So you know how autism is a spectrum disorder. There's severe autism, medium autism, light autism, so forth. So what this guy did is he saw technical research being published of how a video multimodal AI can look at a video and very with extreme precision be able to identify what someone did in the video. The research was done in basketball. They basically said when someone did a right-handed layup or a left-handed layup. This was academic research, I think, from Carnegie Mellon. I forget exactly. And you should give it a video, and the AI will say this player did a right-handed layup, this player did a left-handed layup. So the founder here was someone who has children with autism. He has two sons, both with autism, one with severe, one with light. And he decided, you know what? Why don't I look at that, apply it to my children, and see how well I can phenotype the severity of a disease? And now we're applying these cross-functional capabilities that were experimented in basketball, and we're applying it to kids with autism, and the results are amazing. When you apply a video and you look, you can quantify, for the first time, truly quantify how many times a child's eyes look at the eyes of the therapist. And that is a clinical outcome. Before, people have to guess, so on and so forth. So now he's phenotyping. We bought an autism clinic, and we're phenotyping children across a wide range of things. So then we can say, hey, this child will need speech pathology sooner. This child is actually relatively good. He just needs this. So, and that is leading to a lot of interesting success. Now let's go on the right side of this slide. This is life sciences. So I know a lot of the audience is a little bit more technical life sciences, so hopefully this will also resonate. So 47 is a Lightspeed portfolio company, and it was two academics out of Stanford, and the lesson here is they were building an immunotherapy, and what they did very smartly is they decided to actually fund it through government funding until phase 1B, which is pretty far. So if you have the opportunity to hold it through phase 1B, which by the way, I know that's difficult. That's not everybody can do that. But if you have that opportunity, then your terms as a founder, when you go out to raise venture capital, are so much stronger. So it's usually in life sciences and biotech, even in the United States, when you raise a Series A in the United States as biotech, you give up a big chunk of your company. You give up like 50 to 60% of your company. In technology, it's the opposite. You give up only 20%, 25% of your company in your Series A. So biotech is a lot more onerous. Investors own a lot more because the risk is generally higher or so perceived. So the longer you can stay and fund through non-dilutive means, the more power you have. So then when these guys finally took venture capital, they remained in control of the company. They had more equity in the company. And the other lesson on 47 was, I'll tell you this, the valuation of the company at the Series B was, I'll give you an example, but I think let's say $9. It had all this progress. It had all this progress, and yet investors didn't quite value it at the level. So it remained $9 for 3 more years, despite progress. And then finally, Gilead went ahead and bought it for $4.9 billion. And it went from $9 to $90 share per price. So one of the lessons here is biotech and life sciences can sometimes be tough because valuations don't often reflect progress. You want them to, they try to, and you try to convince, but that doesn't always happen. And you're very much also subject to what the M&A markets looks kind of at that time. Okay, let me keep moving forward because I realize actually I'm taking too long. Um, Personalis is another example we can talk about, and those honestly, let's just move forward because I want to cover some other points. Um, Technical founders, look, we can talk about this as well, but I think we got most of the learning. So let me skip through this. So like in terms of you know what works and what doesn't, some of this will seem pretty standard, but whether it's health tech or life sciences, try to go for real pain points. And when you look for pain points, don't just look at from a clinical lens. If you want to have commercial success, you have to understand that this is a pain point for the end buyer. So if you're doing biotech or life sciences or medical device, you better make sure it's a pain point, not just for the patient. Yes, obvious. That's don't even start something if it's not really needed. But it also you need to do your research in terms of what the end buyer is going to like. Is it a a medical device company, a biotech company? And by the way, that research isn't always easy. You have to like speak to these people to be like, so every year at Lightspeed, we go to a major conference, JP Morgan conference, and we talk to all of the major pharma companies and we say, okay, what's most interesting to you this year? What modality? What stage? You want antibodies? You want degraders? You want small molecules? Like, what are you most interested in? And you'd be surprised. These priorities change. New CEO comes to Gilead, priorities change. New CEO moves into Novartis, priorities change. So you have to kind of keep in mind and keep a pulse on that. These other things are pretty self-explanatory, so honestly, I'm going to skip this and move forward because I want to get to the AI point last. Oops, let me go back here for a second. So, oops, I keep moving this because don't see the title. Here we go. So, guys, like I'm sure you hear AI so much and it covers all the news and everything so forth, but what's happening today is I think once in a generation opportunity. And there is so much happening across just performance. I don't know, like we are investors into Claude, and even my job, VC, it's now my daily driver. I use it, it's what I do all my work through. This presentation part, most of it was done by Claude Cowork. I just had to prompt it in and make sure everything is all right. But the main thing that I want to impress here, it's probably on this next slide, is that right now we're in this like unique moment where people are starting to ask the question, where does enduring value lie? Where does durability live? So right now on the left-hand side, I'll tell you a ton of startups will build the capability right on top of GPT, Claude, Gemini. And by the way, that includes life science companies too. and then the model provider will add a feature set, and now this startup itself is getting disrupted. So companies that call themselves disruptors are being disrupted 6 months later. It's happening that fast. And this is because most of these companies sit on top of the model layer. What's interesting now, and this is what a lot of venture capitalists are now thinking, it's getting through the markets, is that we're thinking, where does durability lie? And there are three kind of areas on the right side. One, primary data creation. Yes, use the best models, but are you in creating new data that enters the world? It can so it's not just a wrapper on public information. Are you creating new physiological, biologic, geologic, whatever it is in your field? Are you creating new data that enters the world? Because if you are, then you sit at the upstream of the entire compute chain. The second thing is, are you impacting a physical world application? Because so much of the software world is completely changing. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you guys are keeping in mind, but like software engineering is pretty much now automated. There are software engineers, of course, because they're changing, adjusting things, and they will be fine. The smart guys will figure something out. But physical world applications are now having a premium in the market. And then, of course, third is like deep domain expertise because you have to know even what questions to ask on top of your primary data and the physical world application. So, what this all comes to me is that, particularly for this audience, and I've been spending a lot of time at Stanford, I'm an adjunct professor there now, that that this is, I think, a unique moment where scientists, not um, not pure engineers or commercial people, have an irreplaceable advantage. Wet labs, clinical data, whatever it is, material science, you have to turn that into like right now, it is a source of durable advantage. And that window, I don't think will stay open forever. There are some savvy entrepreneurs who are already like figuring this out and trying to say like, how can I be at the source of data creation? And by the way, that data creation doesn't have to be something completely crazy novel, like, oh my gosh, I got the the newest data from the moon or something like that. I'll tell you, like one of my companies, um, it uses AI agents to call patients and it asks patients a number of questions. So then they have information on patients before even the doctor does. That's primary data creation. You created data that otherwise wouldn't exist. It's not out there, it's not out in the internet. And so you create it, and now you can impact and drive value, drive business cases, so on and so forth. But also, there's more real world examples like sensors. People say like even like old school sensing companies that sit in manufacturing depots are actually becoming to get valued a lot more because they are the ones that can build the software on top. They don't need the software. The software is very easy to build now. So I would very much encourage you all to spend a lot of time learning how you can use the AI tools today so that you can empower your core advantage that already exists. Very, very important. Um, and so how do you in your current journeys do that right now? Obviously, you can found a company. But if you start a company, I think what you should do bare minimum, there's a nice there's a free courses out there called Anthropic online courses. Literally, you take those, they're not actually that long on Claude, MCP, some of these capabilities. You will at least know the capabilities of the technology. Half the battle is to know what it's even capable of. You're probably still stuck in GPT chatting, back and forth similar questions. These agents could run a number of projects for you just by themselves if you know that that's even possible. So, found a company if you've done that research. Don't found it if you haven't done that, because otherwise you're going to be operating in an old world mentality. Do that work so that you can go ahead and start a company around that. Other things that you can do besides starting a company, because I know that's hard, that requires capital. We got families to feed, et cetera, et cetera. So you can also join a startup, but make sure that startup is serious. And that's when venture capital friends become really valuable because you can just come. Let's say if Galamjan decides to join a startup, he can come to me and be like, "Hey, Galam, could you I'm thinking about this company. What do you think?" And one, I can give you an opinion, but even more, I can go through my database and find out how is the company doing. if we met it and we know its valuation, I can be like, relative to valuation, you come in now, your equity is not going to be worth much. Or oh, this is a hot company. Come in now, your equity will be worth uh, really nicely. So use your network to know the companies even before you join them. Or if you're still a fellow, or you're still kind of not quite ready to join a startup or found, there are so many things I think you can do to help get yourself up to speed. So I was a venture fellow when I was in grad school. I was just giving my time, and I wasn't paid very much. In my first fellowship, I wasn't paid at all, which was technically illegal, but that's what you had to do. That's what I had to do. If you already have a source of expertise, start advising and consulting. And I would create, literally go to Claude, put in your resume, put in your CV, put in all your publications, and say, here's my body of work. Go out there and find top 10 companies that are around me that may benefit from this expertise. Oh, and by the way, here's my login credentials. Go into LinkedIn and find the top 5 people that are actually somewhat related, and I could ask an introduction. Oh, and now that you have them, go ahead and draft emails. Like all of this can be done, and it doesn't take that long. The first few times it'll be a little bit clunky. You want to double check everything, but then eventually, like these technologies can help you do even these parts really well. Obviously, if you have some money yourself, angel investing is a nice way of learning, but no, most of that is going to go to zero. So it's a little bit expensive way of learning, but that's possible. And of course, I'm sure if you're part of institutions, there's all these accelerators programs. They can be good, but it just depends. Like the way I would view it, accelerator program, do them, but know that know that you have to go above and beyond. Just like my mom told me when I was in undergrad, when I was in growing up, you go to school, that's public school, and then you do your real work. So anyway, those are some thoughts. Obviously, Kazakhstan and our population, I think we're very talented. The question now is like, how can we condense like 15 years or what people did in 15, 20 years in 5 years? I think this AI moment can actually give us an opportunity to leapfrog others if we're very intentional about it as a community. So anyway, thank you. Let me stop talking. That was a lot, and give some time back to you guys.
Ramzan, that was wow. Really, it was amazing having all this information gathered and full of insights. I think our audience really appreciate it. And in the US, also working in the Lightspeed, seeing all these things that happening currently and transferring to us, people in different parts of the world. I think it's fresh air. That feeling, okay, this direction where I think everyone appreciate. So we have several questions from
Mhm.
audience has been submitted before. So, so first question is, you are trained as a physician, but you choose venture capital. How does thinking like a clinician change your evaluation startup compared to traditional investors? So that's interesting. Like it explores how medical expertise shape your venture investing decisions. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, I like that. I think a very good question. I will say two things. One is like the EQ, emotional intelligence, right? IQ, EQ. I think the EQ actually translates really well. You have to know that the moment you go see a patient, you have to match them where they are. Are they very well educated or not? Are they really angry coming in, or they're actually very chill? And so you immediately come down and you start asking questions to find out who this person is, where they are in their life, how they think, and then you go ahead and do all the questions. And then I would say, actually, even structurally, the questions are very similar. Like, let's say, what do you start with? History of present illness, which is like, what's going on with you? Like, even to a startup. Past medical history. What did you do in your life? How did you build it? Review of systems. Let's go neurological, this. All right. Like, how is it? And the review of systems for a company is how are the operations? How is the technology team? How's the sales organization? And then you have all these metrics, like labs. Labs are pure metrics of the company. So it actually works quite well, surprisingly.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. Yeah, second follow-up question is like about many biotech innovation fails due to translational gaps. So in healthcare investing, how do you distinguish between companies that are scientifically impressive and those can really realistically transform clinical practice? How you differentiate them?
Oh man, that's a tough question. That's a really tough question. So the way I would answer it, it's kind of it's a simple answer, but honestly, sometimes that's what it comes down to is if you're going after a really ambitious big market problems, then what you need, and it could be very early stage, then you need to surround yourself by with people that give um, a strong signal of potential performance. So I'll give you an example. Zyra, one of our companies, it raised $1 billion in its seed, a seed round of $1 billion. So in some sense, it kind of what they did is they made a big, big, big goal like solving a bunch of diseases, but they also gathered all the people who could potentially do it, and they raised enough capital. So it almost felt like everyone's together. Everyone, like this is the industry's bet, we're all gathering. So that's like the extreme. So if you're gonna go after ambitious like that and something early stage, then you need to bring and by the way, they brought Mark Tessier-Levine, who was the president of Stanford. So like you need big signals of credibility more than even potentially will this work. Just being very realistic. And then on the more realistic side is I'd be very specific. Like we only invest in companies 1 or 2 years away from IND. IND is means you submit to get into preclinical where you finish your preclinical trials and you're about to ready to go into clinic. So 1 or 2 years away from that. So then and then you choose a modality. Like one thing we like sometimes like at least for Lightspeed, we won't take target risk. We'll take modality risk. We want to make sure the target is validated. Let's say, I don't know, CD47 or whatever it is, or some protein. If target is validated, that already reduces a lot of risk, but then we'll go ahead and design the better antibody. Maybe it's a bispecific versus a different kind. So but you need to go to like some investors want more risk, some investors don't want the risk. And the only way you can know that is by talking to them. So then you'd be like, all right, yeah. So anyway, hopefully that answers that
Yeah,
question.
yeah, totally. Galym, another follow-up question. So, and after that, we will jump to chat box questions. So we still have 10
Mhm.
minutes. So Lightspeed has been historically like very strong software and consumer tech. How does health tech investing differ from traditional Silicon Valley venture modes? So it's why it's interesting because healthcare follow
Yeah.
very different regulatory and adoption dynamics. So can you more elaborate about that? Thank you.
Absolutely. So this was a strategic decision. The fund started in 2000, and only 20 years later did they officially start a healthcare team. So
Mm,
I think it was basically the way they viewed it is they said, look, healthcare is like a fifth of the US economy. If we want to be the best, biggest, the leading venture capital fund, we have to have a strategy for something that represents a fifth of the US economy. So, and then what we had to do is we had to create an investment committee that evaluated healthcare deals differently. Totally, you're right. Like we had, I mean, our team on healthcare are PhDs, MDs, that kind of background.
mm,
You couldn't quite, and then the expectations was a little bit different. Like when we invest in a biotech company, we're like, okay, the expectation is not going to start revenue, just like a normal Y Combinator consumer app company. So I think once you laid out those expectations, and it also came from leadership, the leader said, look, we know this is different. We know the returns can be great. We know it'll take longer, but net, this is a strategy we need to have as part of our portfolio. And it's also helps diversify the portfolio. If tech goes down, well, maybe biotech goes up, and
mm.
so on and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah, that may make sense. That's why they hired you because they need really talents from health tech, the people that understand this all hype. Otherwise, it's very hard. As you said, health tech is totally
Yeah.
different. So another question, we will move to Aijan's question. She's raising a hand before to going to her Umar's question. So Umar is asking, what's your advice to administrative AI for underdeveloped countries? What should be the focus area where technology is a bottleneck?
That is a good question. So administrative AI is probably not as much of a cost center in developing countries.
Mm,
Um, there's probably still some value, meaning like you can make processes faster. You can probably make note taking, et cetera, faster. But then I would give you slightly different advice than a pure US company. The US market is so big, you can be an admin company and do just fine. But in a developing world, I think you might need to bundle more capabilities. So do administrative, but also start doing clinical decision support. Start adding like diagnostic suggestions much sooner so that in the developing world also not that intelligence is scarce, but clinical knowledge is more scarce. So go ahead and start plugging in clinical capabilities, not just administrative. I think you need to be more bundled. Also, since the market is smaller, you need to combine both things so the company becomes large enough. I'll give you an example. One of our companies does work in the developing world, and they do AI. So, like in the US, it's an AI imaging company. They scan X-rays. So in the US, it's just a suggestion. It's like here's our suggestions. But when they go to parts of Africa, it is the official read because they don't have enough radiologists for their population. So they worked with the ministry and got it approved as an official read, not even a clinician read. And so I think you need to do more. That's the short answer. But the good answer is that software is a lot cheaper to build now. You can have one engineer build a lot more capabilities.
Yes, definitely. As you mentioned, this market of administrative AI in the US is 1 trillion, and that's why it's very different from other countries. Another question from Alienur. Alienur, also based in US, he's saying, if you heard and or encountered Merge Labs, which raised 252 millions, or OpenAI backed, and if yes, what do you think of them as one of the new tech development pivots in the field of molecular imaging? Merge Labs.
I heard about it. I don't know enough to have a strong opinion, but thank you for highlighting this. I will definitely take a look at it afterwards. I'll definitely take a
Yeah.
look. But I think if they're doing the one thing that related to this, I think OpenAI and Anthropic are both they both, we have our scouts, so we both saw that they opened up wet labs in San Francisco. They just acquired wet lab um, facilities. So that makes you wonder, okay, they're going to be getting into more of this deep tech work really quickly, really soon. So very interesting, but I'm glad you're taking a look. I will take a look as well.
Could I
Thank you,
follow up?
Elinor.
Like in
Yeah,
audio,
sure.
yeah. It's I think this technology is ultrasound-based imaging technology.
Mm,
So they basically readapted basically prokaryotic gene expression to eukaryotic mammalian cell lines. They already made a proof of concept and validated that in vivo in mice to have much more like basically in-depth and breadth spatial resolution when it comes to vasculature imaging. So they're trying to
mm,
adapt it to BCI in terms of competing with
ah,
Elon Musk and brain-computer interface, have which like way higher and greater resolution and spatial resolution in regards to brain imaging, tissue imaging, and
mm,
whatever. Because fluorescence and luminescence based imaging is quite limited in regards to the depth
mm.
and basically kind of the breadth that you can do. So they tried to go through that. Actually, I was curious because I made it to the first round of interview to their company specifically for the wet
Mm.
lab position, and I got rejected. But I was just curious if you know about them.
No, that's good. Look, I'm that's the most important thing is that you heard about them and you applied. I
Because
haven't. Yeah,
they asked me to read like multiple first offer
yeah.
papers basically, and I think one of their technologies based off the Caltech professor is the dates to 2019, like the first ever
Okay,
publication. I think it was in Science.
one suggestion I'll give to you, Alinur, because I gave this to my little brother. My little brother just he's an AI guy. He just got a new job, and now when you apply or any next year thing you do, get your research you look at what they do, get the research papers, everything, and then honestly go build something before you even have the interview, so that when you show up you say, hey guys, I look at your research, I know the direction you're heading, here's like, don't do exactly what they do, just do what they do and slightly different. Be like, I decided to build out an application that does actually this kind of research, and just go build it, use Claude Code and build it and show it to them. It actually, that impresses people, especially if you, let's say, if you're not technical from a software engineering perspective. But if you do that, they immediately start thinking of you as like, oh, this guy's high slope. This guy quickly is using the newest technologies. And at least my little brother had a lot of success building tools before the interview. So you're already showing you're doing the job. Show you're doing the job rather than just saying I'm going to do the job. And it's so much more easier now because of the tools that you have.
Oh, thank you so much. It's useful advice, but I already committed, so I have a job already. So it's
Oh, okay, good, good
not
deal. Well,
as if
congratulations.
yeah.
Congrats.
Another crazy recommendation actually. Build that product that they build pretty much different. But yeah, I think it's crazy. Thank you for this insight. Very much resonated. We have a question from Hormet. Hormet joining from Japan. Really appreciate Hormet. It's very late in Japan. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? He's a MD nurse and cooperate closely at hospitals. Hormet, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, Hormet, please go
I
ahead.
could read my question.
Yeah.
Just an introduction. I'm educated as a nurse from Nazarbayev University and doing masters in disaster science and radiation science. So I was curious if I would have some thoughts to enter this market of ventures. Can can nurses even make it?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What
No,
kind of
look.
skills do I need? I
Well,
just
well,
feel
oh, you mean by
unqualified.
building or actually investing? Just to make sure I
Um,
understand. Yeah.
just having the first steps and entering this market of AI and all this hype
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
around that.
How
Okay.
What
building,
kind of
building, building.
ventures?
Building. Yeah, I
Building,
got
yeah,
it.
being a part of
Yeah.
it.
So first of all, look at all your background and everything as turn it always into the positive and be like, that means I am most closest. Let's say if you are a nurse, that means you are more closer to the end patient than even the physician who sits over there in the back, whatever, so on and so
Yeah,
forth.
we do.
You have
Yeah.
higher signal of what's happening on the ground, and then take that advantage and build something in that area of expertise. The building part, like right now, Kurmet, just start building. Like literally, I have started building shenanigans myself. It's not that difficult. Get yourself a Claude code, and just
Right.
think about, all right, what are three interesting applications I'm just interested in? Or maybe that could help my organization. Let's say if you're working at some hospital, be like, you know what, let me try to build something. Don't worry about integrations. Don't worry about that. Of course, that's going to be difficult. Just build the application. Build, maybe it's a tracker of like, early detection of disasters. Sounds like you're interested in something into that. Like, or maybe say, hey, maybe build a dynamic model saying if we hit another major earthquake in Japan, how much volume of patients are going to be coming in, and do we have all the supply chain ready for it? Just and when you don't have the data, just make assumptions. Build a database. Say simulate. My hospital is this big. Simulate, create a database of this how much supply chain. So then you go to your people and be like, guys, here's something I built. Would that be interesting? If I have this data, I could actually make it worthwhile. Do that more and more and more, iterate, and then you'll get better at it. You'll gain more confidence, and then maybe you could actually build a company out of it. You'd be surprised. But just start building and use your background as a source of pride of how close you are to a particular problem.
Mm,
I think Galym is very insightful
that's
as
very helpful.
a frontline person. As Hormet said, he's a frontline nurse, and he can really sense what's the pain point, and based on that, to try to create something. Thank you, Hormet, for question.
Yeah,
We have
thank you very much.
yeah, we have Diana from Germany. Diana, if you want, you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, hi, so good evening. So I'm actually from the R&D in industry working on the gene therapies, hardcore. Also, as you started, basically hardcore wet lab biologist. Currently, we're actually very curious because of the fluctuations in the medical field. So what I'm seeing is that in the gene therapies, basically being very expensive, like in terms of the science, I'm seeing very beautiful platforms that have created. We're having this, so to say, market fit with in terms of how you also explain to fit the clinical translations, also like tied the papers and so on. But they do stay as in terms of beautiful platforms. And then I wanted your overview from the top of what you see, what kind of could have been a real bottlenecks to actually scale up those type of technologies.
That's a very good observation. It is one that we saw particularly during COVID times. A ton of startups came up to build interesting platform companies. It was like a PhD, a CS PhD from Stanford, a clinician from like Harvard. They team up, they build really cool science. It looks like a really interesting platform, and then they don't really go anywhere. And I think the problem is because talent on clinical development is very tight. Like how many good drug developers do you have? Platform builders, you can actually have a lot, but drug development talent is very tight. So one of the things we look at Lightspeed is we say, all right, cool, sexy science, that's nice, but do you have a chief medical officer who can write a really good IND application? Do you have a biochemist who can actually turn your interesting platform insight into what the asset would look like? That talent is actually really hard to get. And I think that's why the bottleneck is there. So, Diana, like if you were to join a company or to start a company, those would be the guys I would hire first. Well, it depends. It depends. Like you can start as a platform company, but then you have to hire those guys really quickly to show credibility. But I think yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
And what about, for example, like if we talk about rather, a service-based company, right? So like a middle-sized company, and then we have like a higher tech, which is like Novartis and Novo Nordics, and they like, and then for example, what's your opinion on when you're treating the rare diseases? So basically, the market is already fit, so we're like narrowing down the
Yeah,
research.
yeah, yeah.
And then what like we're experiencing obviously in the decline after the COVID explosion on the market right now, even the hardships to find a partners with. And it's a middle-sized company, so it's not even like a startup anymore.
I see, I see. Okay, so what you're saying is you are at a rare disease company. They're looking at these rare diseases. Yeah, I mean, the good thing with rare disease, yes, you've de-risked the end market, but if it's too small, then pharma won't even be interested. But I'm sure you didn't choose a small one. You probably chose a big enough one. So the question is like, how far along is your lead asset? That's the entire valuation of the business is how far along is your lead asset. It doesn't matter how many interesting things are in preclinical. Um, that's a challenge. I mean, it's biotech is hard right now. The Chinese market is like causing existential issues to the US biotech market as well, just how fast they build.
I mean, in Europe, we're also right now optimizing everything here. So
Yeah.
like it's a very huge trouble here, I have to say. I'm really appreciating your session though. Also with that,
Okay.
John, like it's very inspiring talk. Really, thanks a lot.
Oh, great. Thank you. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Diana.
that.
Thank you, Diana, for question. So we a little over time, guys. Very quick, two questions. Farida. So Farida, I will read it. I'm a practical ocular oncologist and currently research field in the US, in Kazakhstan. Plaque brachytherapy for ocular tumor is not available because we don't have radiation plaques. I'm interested in developing and designing a plaque application in the future. What will be first step to initiate such project, and how could I make it attractive to government or sponsors? My answer is cloud. Is it right?
Yeah, that's a very good, big specific question. But I'm thinking, okay, so one, it sounds like this technology exists, it's just not in the it's just not in Kazakhstan. If that's the
Yes.
case, and it's about, yeah, so see, here's the thing. Well, I mean, my initial response to that would be, hey, if this technology already exists in the US or Europe, and there is an end market in Kazakhstan, I mean, why don't you talk to the people that build it in the US and Europe and say, hey, I will be your collaborator for the Central Asian region. Um, if it hasn't been, well, I guess what you would need to also double check is you would need to make sure that the government in Kazakhstan pays for this. It's going to be a new cost, I would imagine. So you need to do both. Like I would go first to make sure that this technology, like if you don't need to rebuild it, just license the technology. If I understand it correctly. And then you do the usual thing, just like to a venture capital, you go to a government and say, guys, if you pay for this, the cost on downstream complications will be lower. It has to be obviously life saving in some either life saving or life extending enough. Like in the UK, they have this concept as a qualified life year or whatever, and it's like $80,000 for a qualified life year or a quality life year. So in the UK, they say if your treatment extends someone's life in a good quality by 1 year, we can pay at least 80,000 for it. So I'm sure Kazakhstan has some method of evaluating whether a new technology should be paid for. But I would spend a lot of time on both ends, the technology provider and the people who would pay for it. And then you sit as potentially the administrator in the middle.
Yeah, Farida, thank you for your question. I think it's very good to answer. And last question from Ayjan. Ayjan saying, what do you advise for early career scientists who work in a specific research question to develop an understanding of larger trends and opportunities biotech innovation?
Yeah, so I think I to develop and understand the larger trends. I think, look, the larger trends of biotech innovation, obviously, it's a very good question because the default is to be on top of your particular domain. You said you're early career scientist, right? So maybe you're doing a PhD or something like that.
Sorry,
So
can
like,
I unmute myself?
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi. Hi, thank you for the talk. My name is Ajandia. I'm a fourth year PhD student. And so as a PhD student, you become very your research is very specific, kind of very niche. And my question is how to develop this understanding of like larger trends. So how do you transition from becoming specialist in your specific question to understanding a bigger trends?
Yeah. So in the past, I would say you just need to be in the right information flow, right? So I would be subscribing to a bunch of newsletters that are more broader, that are not just in your field. I would also look at what's getting funded by both traditional means like pharma and what's being funded by more novel means like venture capital, right? Like you should, but now you don't have to just Google this. Just create again a collab project where it just gives you a weekly summary and tell it specifically, like, look, I'm in this field. My technical expertise is this. Please broaden my aperture and give me both like traditional sources of where biotech is heading, but also I would say non-traditional because like anyone with a PhD background here should feel confident to go into another field. I was a viral vector guy and now I went into venture capital and I'm doing all sorts of weird things now. So like we should feel confident that like that the skill sets of a PhD will translate to this stuff. But like for example, you wouldn't know just how much Silicon Valley is in love with BCI right now. They just love BCI, everything BCI, and there's not enough talent there because no one even knew what BCI was a few years ago. So that field will grow by other technical people moving into it. So like if that's interesting to you, make that, or obviously there's more and more. But I would create, I would do that, and then the other thing is like in a real life thing, I would just make sure you're networking. Like make sure you're talking to venture capitalists. Make sure you're talking to maybe BD people, business development people at pharma companies, because they will have the early signals.
Ajan,
Yeah.
thank you for
That's a
your
good question.
question. Very good question. So with that, Alm, I apologize for overtime. Yeah, really, so far I experienced so many speakers, Alm. It was amazing, really. And
Oh, thank you.
audience,
I appreciate
really, like God bless you, God, your family, taking a time and sharing with us all of the things that happening in other side of the world, where is the front line. And with that, I want to ask everyone just to take a group photo with Alm, and I think it's a very good session.
Yes.
And if you don't mind, please show your camera. We'll take a photo, and with that, we will finish the session. Yeah, we hope we will continue this session and continue to invite other amazing speakers. So we're going 1, 2, 3. Taking another one. 1, 2, 3. Great. Alm, thank you. Alm, if you want to say
Thank you, guys.
something. Yeah, so I just
No,
want
yeah,
to.
just it's good to see all the smiling faces. And look, if you're taking this call, it's evening for you, or it's Sunday somewhere. So that means you guys are hustling. So keep up the hustle.
Thank you, Raum. Appreciate. Raum, жақсы. Рахмет, Raum.
Okay. All right. Okay. Salam. Salam.
See you guys.
Thank you.